Everyone, good morning from Odessa, Ukraine. You're probably wondering what I've been doing the recent months. So what happened, I moved from New Zealand to Ukraine for a period of time to check actually the living here in Ukraine after living in Western countries for several years, actually more than several years. Because Israel and New Zealand consider Western countries, and you have this conception that the New Zealand and Israel and United States and Canada, all these countries are very rich, and people there living in a very high level of living. And my conclusion is, after living in these countries, well, living in Israel and New Zealand, I definitely disagree with this statement. Let's look at Ukraine. So in Ukraine, the average salary is about 10 to 15,000 hryvnia, so it's about 400 to 600 US dollars per month. Yes, if you compare it to the salary in Western countries, like let's say New Zealand, you have $18 per hour, and you receive salary maybe 20-30,000. It's like some minimum wage per year. Or if you are a skilled professional, and the average salary is about 50,000, maybe 60,000 if it's a little bit higher. So that's the salaries. But let's see, like in Ukraine, you tax a lot less. So why I'm talking about taxes? So eventually, what does it mean? Feel that you live in a good level of living. It means how much you earn, how much left for you to, your basic expenses like food, water, rent, mortgage, whatever. After you pay and all that, how much you actually left for living. And that's actually the most important thing. How much you saving for retirement. Even if you're able to live in a good level of living, so you need to save for retirement as well. Not only, to spend the day or the month and close the month and without any debt. No, that's not enough. That's not the really high level of living. And I must say that there are similarities in living in a Western countries and in a country that consider poor, like Ukraine. Okay, so what I actually see in Ukraine the recent months, I see people are dressed really well. I see a lot of stores, a lot of options to buy electronics, buy food, buy clothes, entertainment. I don't see less options for middle class people here, even though they earn in comparison to Western country less, but I don't see that the level of living here is lower. So what do I mean by that? If I'm looking at the average person in New Zealand, like the middle class person in New Zealand that earns, let's say, $50,000 or $60,000 per year, this is his salary. Like a nurse or a technician, or even if you're IT, so maybe earn 80, 90 maybe. But let's say you earning the minimum salary needed for skilled immigration, for a skilled migrant visa in New Zealand. You earn at least 52,000. So about 20 to 23% on that goes on taxes. Then if you're living in Auckland or any other city, you spend more than 1/3 of it on rent or some kind of housing. Then the food is very expensive as well in the Western countries, a lot more expensive than in Ukraine. So let's in comparison, in New Zealand, if I buy golden apple, So it costs about $4, $5 per kilo. Here in Ukraine it costs 20 or 15 grivna, really high quality apples. And that's about, if it's New Zealand dollar, it's like $1 New Zealand or like 60 cent US dollar per kilo. So your expense here a lot lower. The same as the rent. So the rent on apartments in a major city like Kiev are a lot lower than you spend in rent in Auckland, New Zealand, or New York, or Los Angeles, or London. A lot less. So in an apartment that costs like one bedroom apartment close to metro, public transport, and good location, not in the city center, like good location, it's about 8,000-9,000 grivna, something like that, about 700 New Zealand dollar or 300 something US dollar per month. This is your expense, plus some other expense. Electricity is super cheap here. Oh my god, like I couldn't believe the electricity here is so cheap. And you have the gas, also very cheap. And anyway, so if we look at average, if you live in Ukraine and you consider middle class in Ukraine and earning, it's about, you will have about the same level of living while you'll be middle class in a Western country, because of the cost of living is a lot higher in the Western country, and the cost of living in Ukraine is a lot lower. And okay, the salary is a lot lower, but the cost of living is massively lower. So in consequence, you get the same thing. But the potential here, if you are working globally, let's say earning in US dollar or euro or something else, and you live in Ukraine, so you can consider higher middle class or even higher class. So your life here will be a lot higher. But at the moment, let's focus just being a skilled professional that want to have a good life anywhere in the world. For the average person, I don't see any difference between living in Western countries or countries that considered by, I don't know, by the lists of the financial institutions or GDP and growth and all these things. I don't think how much the middle class person interested to know all the GDP, all these millions that the country or the government earns. I don't know how they care about that. What they care eventually, how much they save each month, if they're able to pay the bills, if they're able to have a good life, go to restaurants, go to vacations, enjoy their lifestyle. This is the most important thing for the middle class person. And the millions that the country earns, I don't see how it's relevant for them. It's not. It just sounds good. All this list of all the best countries in the world to live. I don't find them accurate. It's this marketing, I don't find it accurate. And that's why I'm going to these countries and try to settle, try to live and check in all these areas, like the food cost, apartment cost, how much the taxes are, how people treat you, open a business, all these things that consider people, because eventually the goal is to have like a quite decent life that you can go to work and eventually be with your family maximum time as possible, and have a balance in everything. So my conclusion is that I don't see any major difference between the countries. You can be a very rich person in a country like in Ukraine, and also you can be a very poor person in a country like United States or Canada, and live accordingly. So it eventually depends on you. But eventually, if you are middle class, in some place it's actually better to live in a country that considered poor. And especially if you are working in like a work like IT, or you have work that is not dependent on specific currency. Like you don't have to, you can earn in like better currency, so you can have life a lot in higher level in countries like this. So yeah, so this is my experience. I don't see this country specifically is poor. I also must say that I see a lot of poor areas in the Western countries, when you have people sleeping in cars that are homeless, or even they look like they have good car, apartment, house, whatever. In the Western countries, they are in really high levels of debt. And on the other side, they look like they have a really good lifestyle and really good position financially, but the truth is they don't. A person in other country like Ukraine, maybe he has less, but at least he's not in the same level of debt as in the Western country. Oh, and another thing that I must mention, real estate. So this is one of the highest expenses in the Western world, especially like in Canada, in New Zealand, Hong Kong, that houses cost millions and millions and millions. Or apartments cost like $500, $600, $800,000, like small apartments. Here in Ukraine, in Kiev, you can find apartment not in a really good condition, 2 rooms, 50 square meters for $50,000. 3-bedroom apartment, a new apartment in a new building, it can cost $100,000 plus. 150,000, or super luxury, amazing apartment in Kiev in a really good building, $200,000 for most. You know, that's the cost. So it's still a lot lower than in our Western countries. Just for example, let's say you're working in Australia and you're earning like working in Amazon or some company like that, and you're earning this salary after a few years. You're able to save this salary after a few years. How nice it is to buy property mortgage free from the beginning. How nice it is when you don't need to think, oh, I need to pay the mortgage for 20-30 years. Here in Ukraine, you don't pay mortgages for periods like that. Because now, if you take mortgage in hryvnia, the interest rates are super high. It's like 25% or something like that. So nobody taking mortgages here. Of course, that's really high. That's why the cost of the apartments is reasonably okay. But let's say if the banks will lower the official cash rate to 5% or 1% like now it's in New Zealand, or minus like in Denmark or something like that, yeah? So it will be the same. The cost of real estate will go higher, and the rates go higher, and the cost of living will go higher as well. But they don't do it at the moment. Hopefully they won't, for people who didn't buy anything, or people who bought already real estate. If they lower that, it will happen the same like it happened in the Western countries, that the bubble will start to grow and the prices will get inflated. But for now, if you want to live a good life, I seriously don't see a lot of difference in conclusion between these countries. Financially speaking, there are more areas, but we need several hours to talk about. So, but that's my general conclusion. Have a good day.